Welcome. Today, Transportation Dreams, a special hour on getting cross-town and cross-country quickly and safely. An advocate of a 17,000-mile nationwide high-speed rail system will tell us why opponents of intercity bullet trains are crazy wrong. Here's another dream we ought to consider, a complete transformation of LaGuardia Airport. One visionary has a plan that imitates Paris and repurposes Rikers Island. In our public intellectual segment, we'll hear about a surprising obstacle to bicycle safety. Nationwide, police are failing to report details that might predict bike accidents. And toward the end of the hour, walk, don't walk, traffic signals, street lights, and benches that sense when older citizens, the disabled, and others need to get their bearings and more time to cross the street. But let's begin locally. With New York City's population growing and daily ridership already up to 5.6 million people, why is the MTA's 5-year capital budget plan $15 billion short? And why is this scene not uncommon? Waiting and reading notices and waiting and reading notices and waiting more while half the subway system is down or late or rerouted like it was last weekend. We're betting our guests can offer some insights. Joining us, Elliot Sander. He's been in the hot seat as former CEO of the MTA and former Transportation Commissioner. Now he wears two hats, president of engineering firm HAKS Group and chair of the Regional Plan Association think tank. With us as well, longtime advocate for beleaguered transit riders, Gene Russianoff. He's the spokesman for the New York Public Interest Research Group's Straphangers campaign. Thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
First, just let everybody know out there, what is the difference between a capital budget and an operating budget? Why do we say $15 billion shortfall in the capital plan?
Sure. The material that we categorize as capital are the subway cars, are the buses, are the stations. It's basically general accounted principles. And for those items, those assets that the MTA has that last more than 5 years and have a value over $15,000, $25,000, I don't know what the latest accounting principles are. Generally, the longer term stuff, the heavier stuff, that is capital. Operating is mostly
building new things.
Building new things.
And big maintenance of existing things.
The operating is more your salaries and that kind of stuff.
And keeping the trains running on time.
And this is the 110th anniversary of the subways, and they're showing their age. So we went on a tour given by the MTA of the signal system. And at West 4th Street, we went into the signal room, and there was something that looked like the controls on the Titanic or a Las Vegas slot machine. And I asked one of the women who administered it, what do you do? And she said, we try to touch it as little as possible. So those are the challenges the system faces. Just a very old system, and they've spent about $75 billion since 1982 to get it where it is now, which is ever so much better than it used to be. It's longtime New Yorkers know what a startling difference there is in the subway system, and it's something that has to keep going. It just doesn't stop. You fix the roof, you fix the garage, you redo the kitchen, and it's just a never-ending cycle.
Buy new trains for the Sea Line,
yes,
which had new trains a very long time ago.
1964 for the World's Fair. So Robert Moses would still recognize them as brand new. But for the rest of us, they're creaky, and the people who ride the sea get a terrible level of service. It frequently is the bottom of the barrel on our annual State of the Subway survey.
So do you each have things that you would put at the top of the list for our viewers of a wish list for capital spending? Is it a new line to here, a spur to there, that kind of thing?
Well, as Gene says, the system is so much better. What we learned from when the system basically fell apart in the late 70s and early 80s is that you have to first fix the basic guts of the system, like the stations, like the track, like the signals. And so that is what has to come first, what we call a state of good repair and normal replacement. But then, because the city is going to be growing, we expect by another 1 million people over the next 20 years, go from 8 million to 9 million.
Incredible.
We need to both expand the system with things like the Second Avenue subway.
At least that one's being built.
Well, the first segment, but what's at risk is the next segment. So, the first segment in the Upper East Side will get done in 2016. But to go up to Harlem from 86th Street to 110th Street, and then the next two segments down to downtown Manhattan, that is at risk. So 2nd Avenue subway is high on the list. Bringing Metro North in on the Hudson line and New Haven line into Penn Station, huge benefits to the Bronx.
Because all of Metro North now comes into the
That's
East
right.
Side,
Now,
Grand Central only.
That's right. And so there's a $1 billion project to bring, taking advantage of the work we're doing at Grand Central to bring the Long Island Railroad also in the Grand Central. That creates this space to bring Metro North from Connecticut and Westchester and the Bronx into the far west side, which is New York's next neighborhood with Hudson Yards. So those things are at risk. We also, the RPA has a terrific proposal. It was in our 3rd regional plan. So now we're doing the 4th, called the Triborough RX, which is using the freight lines, as you may have, as you and some of our viewers may have read, that would go in Brooklyn to Queens over the Hellgate Bridge into the Bronx, which create the circumferential transit connection, which we think would be extraordinary in terms of benefit to Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx.
Would your list be the same?
Basically, the key for me is fixing what we got.
Right.
If you ask the average subway or bus rider what they want the vehicle to show up on time. They want it not to be so crowded it's just unbearable. You can't get in it. They don't want to get stuck in the tunnel for 15 minutes with no explanation.
Hello, 7 train riders.
Yes, and so that's where, the people we try and speak up for, that's where their heads are at. And achieving those goals turns out to be expensive and challenging, as much as creating a new spur in the system.
Well, how do you do that? If the ridership is growing because the population is growing, also because I think millennials don't want to drive cars as much as their parents did.
Hooray for them.
Indeed. And the subways are getting more crowded. What can you actually do about that?
Well, there's what the MTA said as a goal, which is computerizing the signal system throughout the subways, which will add to its capacity and operating more trains more safely. There's also a lot of hope with the new technology. It's amazing that I could sit at my kitchen desk and tell my daughter that her soccer game is going to start in an hour and the bus is like down the block, it's time to get out. So to connect, instead of some guy writing down what time the bus is coming, the satellite is telling you precisely when it's going to be there. So those fall into the category of making life a lot easier for the customers without costing an insane amount of money. But they face long-term challenges if there's this growth that's been predicted for the city.
So is there a tension as far as you see it between?
Well, no, I mean, we completely agree, and basically every transportation wonk, nerd, however you call it, agrees. We can't have a repeat of what happened in the 80s. I mean, the implications to the city of New York and the region, I mean, the city almost, we would have just fallen apart if with the transit system where it was. So we all agree that we have to fix the basic guts of the system. And then, on top of that, we need new signals so we can run 30, 33 trains more an hour rather than 25, if you will, depends upon, the line and so forth. And you need within reason.
Can I linger on that for just a second? Because I think
train control.
Communications-based train
which we have in the L train, and we're putting in on the 7.
On the L and the number
right,
1,
and the
where
Queens
you see
Boulevard
the signs
line.
that say how many
That's right,
minutes
the passenger
away.
information, which is what Gene was talking about.
Right, but there are different lines that run at different spacing, even in rush hour. Mm-hmm. Like on the west side, the 1 train seems to run a lot more frequently than the A train. That's because the tracks, something about it, the tracks and the signals can handle more trains closer together?
The way I look see it is they have finite resources. And so a line like the 7 will come every 90 seconds during rush hour. If you're stuck with the C or the B, you're looking at 8, or the G, 8 to 10 minutes at rush hour at best. So if one of them goes out of service, you're really out of luck.
And that
they're managing the resources, having 6,000 trains and putting them in the yards and scheduling them. And those are they have to parcel it out in a way that's fair and makes the system run well. And it's difficult expanding on it. we're constantly pushing them to do so.
Gene's exactly right. The MTA's budget is really constrained. Capital budget was cut by about $4 billion from when I was there. And you
weren't there that long ago. Were you the Spitzer-Patterson?
Right, I was there from 2007 to 2009, and the capital program that we passed, I think, was $28 billion, and now it's like $24. And so the capital budget has been reduced, and then on the operating side, it also is constrained. And so there are load guidelines in terms of how often you run the trains. And I suspect, that they could, I think anyone looking at the ridership could see that we could use some more service. So the budget, as Gene is saying, is beginning to constrain the system.
So
it's not
what
just
are
the technical, it's not just the technical
limitations.
Absolutely. You got the technical constraints on the Lexington Avenue subway.
So
elsewhere,
let me get you to the politics of this, because
then,
all the heads are nodding out there in television land. And yes, fix the subways, make them run better, add the Grand Central and the Penn. Why isn't Albany doing this?
Well, I see it in pretty simple, stark terms. The leadership of the governor has been critical over the decades to getting the money. They've raised, $105 billion for the whole system in the last 25 years, and $75 billion for the subways and buses alone. Now, that wasn't easy, and I have lots of stories. Once they had a guy vote for the program who had been taken out of the Senate for an appendectomy. And they voted him in the affirmative.
Because they needed the one more vote?
Yeah, they needed the one vote. And so a governor who stands in hip boots and gaiters as the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, the UL Carey Tunnel floods, or is there when they open the R, should also be there when the system needs money to keep operating. And it's a heavy lift, as they say in Albany. It's not easy to do. But we're counting on him. The last MTA board meeting, we came with a giant Metro card that was called the Cuomo card, and we made a modest proposition that they renamed the Metro card for the governor, and he could be the big hero. So it's coming up in the next couple of weeks, months. They're debating the future of the program. The good news is that in the end, they tend to come up with a large portion of what's needed. The bad news is that they borrowed a huge sum of money, so that they owe $34 billion. And to put it in terms that people can understand, we found 30 countries around the world whose national debt was smaller than the MTA's. So so before a single bus rolls or train goes out, you have to find $2 billion just to pay the interest off each year on the money that they owe.
Yeah, if I may on that, when I was there, I think the debt was about $20 billion. It will approach $40 billion. The last capital program, we passed the payroll tax with Governor Patterson. Each governor has been very helpful in creating new revenue source. Under Pataki, the legislature than Governor Pataki, we went with a 1/8 sales tax. And then we also passed a bond act. And under Governor Patterson, we passed the payroll tax.
In other words, various mechanisms to actually finance
that's right.
the MTA's
But
needs.
the last 3 years of the current plan has all been debt, which is why the MTA, which was in HAK when I was there for $20 billion, is now going to be in HAK for $40 billion. And as frightening in terms of the implications on the budget, if the next capital program that's now under discussion, if more debt is added on to that than the MTA can sustain, the financial pressure this is going to be putting on running those trains and fixing them will be, really put us at risk.
What does a ride actually cost? I mean, it's $275 now for single ride for rider. What does it actually cost to provide that ride? Is there any accurate number?
The basic stat in the transit business is the fare box operating ratio, which is how much of the daily costs of operating the system are covered by the fare. And it's a matter of controversy. We calculated at about 55% of the cost of running the system, which sounds like a deal, except that San Francisco, Washington, Philadelphia, Boston, Miami, all the other cities in America pay less than we do in New York. And we pay 75% of the costs of running the subways, which is, by far and away the biggest burden on the riders. We pay a lot of the money. And the way we feel is that everybody who benefits from transit should contribute to its well-being. So that includes the riders, but also drivers through tolls and gasoline taxes, corporate profits, real estate. And this is what's been the case for most of the last 20 or 30 years. It's nothing radical. And we look to the governor and the legislative leaders to say, well, it's important to the future of New York. Nobody likes paying taxes, but they have all this time, and everybody is contributing to the well-being of the city's economy.
We just have 30 seconds, but
Sure.
It sounds like you were saying that it was actually easier for you, and I remember how hard it was when you were head of the MTA to get reasonable funding for operating and for capital. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you had it easier 5 years ago, 7 years ago, than your successors do today.
Oh, I mean, I'm not sure about that. We had the 2008 recession. I had to do 2 rounds of fare and toll increases, and I would not say that passing the payroll tax.
That was a financial crisis.
Dick Ravitch, who led that, and I worked with Dick in doing that. I don't think that was easy. So no, I think the politics are roughly the same. I think it's a matter of leadership on behalf of the legislature and the governor and the mayor to do. I don't think that the terrain is. We've been doing this, Gene. I've been collaborating on this for now 20 years. And I don't think that the terrain is any way different in terms of looking at the ways you can do it, whether it's moving New York, congestion pricing, or the other alternatives.
It's always been tough.
It's always been tough.
But in the end, they realize that this is the future of the city we're talking about.
The success of the future of the city is so dependent, as it's been for 110 years, on its mass transit. Thank you both very much. Up next, the case for high-speed rail between cities, which has long been attacked as unaffordable and wrong for the USA. Our next guest thinks big. He envisions a 17,000-mile high-speed rail network crisscrossing the U.S. by 2030. Is this just a dream or important to our economic future, or both? Why hasn't high-speed rail moved ahead at least a bit faster, given the clear support coming from the Obama White House? Joining us via Skype from Washington, the president of the U.S. High-Speed Rail Association, Andrew Kunz. Welcome to our program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We just heard a lament from advocates for better funding for local rail service. Does high-speed rail intercity compete with local subway service in New York and other cities? Do we have to make a choice?
Well, no, we don't have to make a choice, but we do need to increase the amount of money available for all of it. We need all of it.
Who do you blame for these projects not getting off the ground? They sound so exciting on one level when President Obama has put his personal voice behind it, and other people say, oh, high-speed intercity rail, you could go from New York to Washington in X minutes. This could go across the country, across some of the wide expanses. People wouldn't have to fly so much. Airplanes are horrible. So then what happens? Somebody steps up and says, no, 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 no. How come?
Well, there's a lot of big industry that's making money off the current system, and they use their influence to try to prevent any big change from happening, because this would be sweeping change for many, many industries if we started building high-speed rail all over America. It would be a huge improvement, but on the other hand, there will be certain businesses that will see a drop in sales, and they don't want to see that.
Give me an example. Who's threatened, other than maybe the airlines themselves?
Airlines, oil, roads, cars. There's a lot of industries, and a lot of American history revolves around those big industries and establishing them and growing the nation around them. So it's a very entrenched industry in this country.
Do you think that President Obama has been ineffective as a salesman for this?
No, I think he's actually been the most effective salesman. He's been the first president in more than 100 years that's actually constantly talked about high-speed rail, promoted it, actually put money in the stimulus bill for it. But the problem is he can't work alone. He needs Congress's support, he needs state support, he needs business support, and it was somewhat still new to this country.
Some other countries, notably China, are ahead of us. Is it just easier to get done under an authoritarian system?
Well, absolutely. But the thing about China is they actually focused. They made a serious effort. They assigned 10,000 engineers immediately to the project. They built factories overnight, and they made it a national priority. And they put something like $600 billion into it. So when you do that, you can get high-speed rail built very quickly. We can do the same thing.
What is high-speed rail? So for people who've ridden the Acela Express, for example, into or out of New York, Is it that, or is it much faster than that?
Well, the Acela is like a high-speed train, but we never really built the high-speed infrastructure. It's a two-part system. You need the dedicated straightaways and exclusive track to be able to get trains to go 200 miles an hour. So we built sort of half the system. We compromised and cut corners, and we didn't really do the big investment. So when all the high-speed rail around the world, they typically run 186 to 220 miles an hour. That's true high-speed rail, and that's what the California system is actually under construction right now. They're building.
And it can be remarkably smooth. I did have the experience once going between two cities in China on a legitimate high-speed rail at the speeds that you just described, and you know it was smoother than the number 7 train.
Not only are they smooth, they're also extremely reliable. Like in Japan, they time their on-time trains within seconds. So that's the kind of reliability, because the system is so robust and so high-tech that you can count on it. You can set your watch by these trains.
Does the Northeast have the wrong topography for this? Are there too many places where the tracks have to turn in order to do that kind of high-speed rail in this part of the country?
Well, there are kinks and turns along the Northeast Corridor, and to get the 200-mile-an-hour speeds, they would have to be straightened out. So there would have to be, you could use parts of the existing rights of way, but there would be other areas where you'd have to build new rights of way, so you get the long straightaways. So it is a little bit hard. That's why these are harder to build, and they're more expensive to build, because it's a very a high-tech system, and needing the big rights of way and the exclusive. They can't share with freight trains and metro trains and other things like that. It has to be its own exclusive track.
Give us an update on California. I think they're up ahead of the Northeast. How much so, and is it because what we think of as most of the East Coast states are so many states? California has, about the same area, but it's one state. So if they make a decision in Sacramento, they can just go.
Absolutely. And they have a visionary governor who's really put his entire political capital behind it. He has a vision to see the state prosper. You've got a lot of support throughout the state for it. It's a very wealthy state, a very mobile state. So they've already let several, I think they've let about $3 billion in construction contracts already out now. They're already clearing land and demolishing buildings. So it's well underway. It will be the big high-speed rail system of America.
That's between San Francisco and LA, presumably.
And then it will extend to San Diego and also up to Sacramento. And then it will connect across east towards Las Vegas and other places as well.
Is there a certain distance where it kind of maxes out? Like, you don't want to take a high-speed rail, I don't think, from New York to LA. You would still want to fly in most cases for that trip if you could. So is there a certain kind of distance, 300, 400, 500 miles, that's ideal, and after that the benefits fall off?
Well, I mean, it depends on if aviation continues deteriorating, which it seems like it will be, then that distance will keep growing. But right now, the ideal distance for high-speed rail would be anywhere from even as small as 90 miles up to 1,000 miles. That's, makes all the sense in the world, because when you add all the time it takes to get to and from airports and all the advance time you have to be at the airport and security and losing your bags and getting delayed and all that, the trains even at 1,000-mile distance would be faster and more convenient and more relaxing.
Freight trains own a lot of the track infrastructure. Do we need to have public-private partnerships here and not just what we think of in New York as the Amtrak public transportation model?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to need, it's going to be a big puzzle to assemble all the routes that we need and all the land that we need. So parts of it will be existing rights of way on new track. You can't really share the track with the freights because they don't move on schedules and they're slower. But you could get parts of the existing freight rights of way, parts of the highway rights of way, and then some new land that you can assemble. And that's exactly what California is doing right now. They're assembling those three areas of land into the routes and the straightaways and the distances that they need.
I heard that Italy is doing something interesting along these lines. Do you know about it?
Oh yeah, what Italy's done. I mean, all of Europe is building high-speed rail, or already has it. France was the first, and then it's now spread all over 8 or 9 countries, and they're all connecting to each other now. But what Italy has done is the EU came out with a new policy. It's called open access, where they separated the infrastructure from the operations to allow competitive operations. And so in Italy, they have the first private company that jumped into the fray. NTV, they're called, started by the CEO of Ferrari. So they started their own private high-speed rail operation using the public infrastructure, and it's been very successful. Beautiful, we call it the Ferrari trains.
How much of an obstacle is car culture in the United States? We hear it's not as vociferous among the millennials who don't like to drive as much as their parents did. We talked about that in a previous segment. But still, Americans love their cars compared to Europeans. Is that a problem?
I don't see it as a problem because high-speed rail is for longer distances. I mean, your car would still be for shorter distances and local travel, but then if you want to go to the next state or 10 cities away, high-speed rail makes the most sense. So it would really compete with aviation, number one, and then longer distance car travel, number two. So it works perfectly well with, you could still own a car and still use high-speed rail instead of flying on an airplane.
And I see you've got a conference coming in D.C. later this month, April 21st, 22nd, 23rd. Is it just guys who believe in this and women who believe in this getting together, or is it a possible turning point?
Oh, no, it'll be a big event. We probably have a couple hundred people. We've got 6 or 8 members of Congress. We have business leaders from all over the world coming. It's going to be a pretty amazing event, and hopefully we'll be arriving at we'll have some private investors there. So we're really putting together all the people that need to get together to advance this and see how successful other countries have been. We'll have people from other countries presenting their systems and how successful it's been for their economy, for their people, for jobs, for everything. So it'll be a pretty exciting event.
All right, the high-speed rail conversation still taking place in the United States, even though it hasn't been in the news very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Time for Public Intellectual, where we look at new research with the power to change minds and public policy. As more people are taking to the streets on 2 wheels, pedaling down avenues and crossing bridges on narrow designated lanes, bike collisions and casualties are on the rise. More than 700 U.S. cyclists were killed in collisions in 2012, the last year we have good stats for. Part of the problem may be lack of information about these accidents. A Harvard study finds that though police take detailed accounts of car crashes, not always so of cyclist tragedies, and that hamstrings effective public policy and street design. Joining us, Ann Lusk. She's a research scientist in the Department of Nutrition at the Harvard School of Public Health. Her study, called Database Improvements for Motor Vehicle Bicycle Crash Analysis, is online in the upcoming issue of the journal Injury Prevention. She joins us on Skype from Boston. Hello from New York.
How are you?
Good, thank you. What question were you trying to answer in your study?
We first of all wanted to identify if vehicle-bicycle crashes had been appropriately documented and were available for analysis. We learned that the existing police templates record vehicle-vehicle crashes, and only pedal cyclist and helmet is always entered into the spreadsheet for later analysis.
How much data did you collect, and how were you able to quantify that?
We studied in great detail 300 crashes in New York City. We had an equal sample, as much as we could have them equal, of roads without any bicycle facilities, roads with sharrows, that's a painted symbol and a double chevron, roads with bike lanes, and also roads with cycle tracks. Then we took from the New York State Department of Transportation the full police report that included their diagram of the crash, as well as their handwritten text, often in cursive, of what happened at the crash scene. Then we retyped all of their handwriting, and we redrew the crashes using Google Street View so that we could document whether there were parallel parked cars, whether there was a bike lane or a cycle track. Then in reading the crash report, we were able to identify if the bicyclist was actually in a bike lane or there was a bike lane and they were riding outside the bike lane. We also could note if the bicyclist ran into an opened car door or hit a mirror.
So what did you find in terms of the most dangerous and the safest configurations for bicyclists?
I would have to say that my earlier research had shown the value of cycle tracks, barrier-protected, bicycle-exclusive paths beside sidewalks. Those are in between the sidewalk and the parallel parked cars, so the cars cannot get into a cycle track. But there were instances where bicyclists biking in a bike lane that's between the parallel parked cars and the moving traffic could be doored. There were cars that were parallel parked or just standing in that bike lane as well. The major finding was studying all the 50 state templates and learning that only pedal cyclist and helmet were statistically entered. So with a sample of 300, we were able to identify additional new points that we would like to have as coded data entries made into the spreadsheets so that everybody across the U.S. can then analyze vehicle-bicycle crashes.
Let me put up a couple of visuals that accompanied your study, and you can explain to the viewers what you're talking about. Does this represent the different points that you were just referring to? We see the bicycle on the left with, number 1 in the front, 2 on the right side, 4 in the back. The car has so many more designation points. What's this comparison?
When we studied the 50 state templates and also the MMUCC template, we found that the vehicle was represented as a rectangle, and then the second vehicle was also represented as a rectangle. So if you take 2 pieces of paper, 8.5 by 11, and you slide them around in your desk, that's similar to 2 cars colliding. It's 2 rectangles colliding. If you take a pencil and you interact it with that piece of paper, you'll find that the pencil, the bicycle, could go into a car door. It could hit a mirror. So we had numbers for the sides of the bicycle in the collision because the drawings typically did not include collision sides for a bicycle on the 50 state templates. And we also added new numbers for the car that would then interact with the bicyclist because the bicyclist can go inside an opened car door, whereas a car is not going to go inside an opened car door.
So is anybody adopting this? And if so, is it helping make bicycle travel more safe, or is it just too early to say?
We know already that data was used to greatly improve the safety of occupants inside vehicles. The vehicles now have much wider roll bars, they have pillars on the side, much smaller windows in the back, much bigger headrests. So we're hoping by having the data available that analysis could also be done and bicycle environments could be improved, perhaps cars could be improved. The states now, some of them, are using electronic tablets. They're entering, let's say, a police ticket electronically. That is being then automatically uploaded. They don't have to take the written paper back to the police station and type in the information. We know some states are being progressive in trying to incorporate the bike. They might have a bike lane, they might have a shared use path, but they don't have cycle tracks and they don't have sharrows. So some states are getting there. Our hope would be that all states would have the same uniform electronic tablet with a drop-down menu that would be specific for vehicle-bicycle crashes, so that we can then look at all the data for vehicle-bicycle crashes across the U.S. and design better bike environments and also better cars.
And since you compared all 50 states, how does New York rate?
New York is similar for the reporting of the vehicle-bicycle crashes, similar to how the other states report them. Pedal cyclist is identified, helmet is identified, but the second vehicle is the pedal cyclist, and yet there's a picture of a vehicle shown and not the drawing of a bicycle. New York State Department of Transportation was terrific to give us all the data. It was redacted. They had crossed out personal information, but they were very generous to send us the 300 crashes plus many other crashes so we could identify ones with crash diagrams and do the analysis. So we're grateful to New York City and New York State Department of Transportation, but the templates themselves pretty much resemble the other state templates across the U.S.
I think you've been in this game for a while before bicycles became so hot as they are in just the last few years. Have you seen a meaningful progression?
I started building the Stowe Recreation Path in Stowe, Vermont, a nice shared use path about 5.3 miles long with 10 bridges. And then I became a professional lecturer around the country because other people would ask me, how do I build a path in my community? So we started off with many rail trails in the country, then shared use paths. And then with the popularity of the bike, we found that instead of just the touring bike rider, the drop-down handlebar, that the mountain bike was showing up on the roads. And then we were looking to the Netherlands, and we were wanting to bring the Oma Fiets and the Opa Fiets bike here. So we finally said we need to have cycle tracks. So we had done the research on the cycle tracks, and we've seen a recent boom in biking across the U.S. Many cities now have bike share programs, and with a bike share program similar to Paris with the Vélib', you should first put in the safe bicycle infrastructure and then bring in the shared bike if possible.
You mentioned that the data that does exist is for helmets, among one or two other things. Can you determine from data that wearing a helmet does make a big difference in your outcome if you are in a crash?
Certainly, if you are in a crash, it would be preferable to have on a helmet. But we know all of the studies about the tremendous health benefits from biking. We know the Dutch have a policy that they don't want people to have to wear a helmet because that would suggest that biking is unsafe. And they would rather create wide cycle tracks so that the parent can bicycle with a child, a friend beside a friend, and everyone then can use the bicycle as a form of transportation. We don't ask people to walk on the sidewalk and then wear a helmet because they could fall down or they could be hit by a car when they're crossing in the crosswalk. So we can't say for sure that helmets would absolutely improve the safety of people who were riding and wearing a helmet. But we do know that we would rather protect the bicyclists by not just saying, well, put on a helmet and go bike in the road. Instead, we'd rather say, choose to wear a helmet if you want to or not, but here's a cycle track for your safer biking.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Next up on our special on transportation, remaking the city so LaGuardia Airport works. 55 years ago, the aviation community called it the greatest airport in the world. In recent years, it's been ranked worst in the city, worst in America, and among the worst in the world. Joe Biden referred to it in a call to repair America's infrastructure as, and famously, quote, "If I blindfolded you and took you to LaGuardia, you'd think you were in a third world country," unquote, from Joe Biden. LaGuardia is just not in great shape, and it's hard to get there, even worse. Last fall, the state and Port Authority launched a design competition to rethink LaGuardia and JFK airports to make them more efficient and better linked to public transit. One very radical idea has caught our attention. It rethinks not just LaGuardia, but the whole city and regional transit system. Here to take us through it, the man with the plan, founder of RethinkNYC.org, Jim Venturi. Hi.
It's .com.
.com. Okay. So you're making money on this.
Okay,
it's
yes.
a commercial site. RethinkNYC.com, I apologize. And how big, how sweeping, we'll get into LaGuardia in some detail, but how big, how sweeping is your grander vision?
The idea is to create a single-seat ride for every single commuter on New Jersey Transit and Metro North, and a very easy change for everyone on Long Island Railroad. So it could be a global airport and the premier airport of the region, and probably the greatest airport in the world.
So how, when you say a single-seat ride, you mean there would be Metro North, New Jersey Transit, train that just sort of continues from Penn Station or Grand Central, or you switch trains to the LaGuardia special and the JFK special?
When we were designing the plan, we realized that the neighborhood in the Bronx that's directly opposite the East River from LaGuardia is where the Northeast Corridor is, the train that goes between New York and Boston. And so what we're doing is we're running the entire New York City transit system through the Northeast Corridor and unifying it the way Paris was unified by the RER.
So maybe that pertains to this first slide that we're going to put up. This is LaGuardia Airport and Port Morris in the Bronx. What are we looking at?
Okay, great. We have our existing LaGuardia Airport. We've added 2 more runways and added runways that are long enough for global flights, the same size as Newark. And that's the reason for the delays and the danger at LaGuardia. So we're turning into a global airport. And those exist on what is now Rikers Island. And then across the water, connected by an underwater air train, is the terminal in the Bronx, which has a 22-track rail system station that's the size of Penn Station, as well as the 2nd Avenue subway and A train that goes through there. So it becomes every single train line in the region based on this plan, except for Long Island Railroad, would stop at the station.
Let's backtrack a little bit and talk about what it's like now.
Great, yeah.
And I think we're going to see a visual that represents part of this. This is the current view?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I flew into LaGuardia, and I was just struck that there was such a proximity between the runway and Rikers. And I always thought it was crazy, this idea that this prison, where it could be anywhere, is located next to this very valuable real estate. And the RPA has a plan
that's the Regional Plan Association think tank. Our first guest earlier in the hour, Elliot Sander, is the president of that. If you've been watching from the beginning, go ahead.
In 2011, they said we need 78 more flights per hour for the region by 2030 to be able to keep pace. And we took the attitude that, number one, we need to do that, but number two, we need to move people from air to the rail for all short-haul flights like France has done. And so we've created a rail-air integration that's the tightest anywhere in the world. So you see the blue, that's the Northeast Corridor line between New York and New York and Boston. And the red is the Metro North lines that go to the Hudson line and the Harlem line. The white dotted line is an abandoned railroad line called the Port Morris branch. And so what we've proposed is to connect these two together and allow for the Harlem line, which would go into Penn Station, and the Hudson line to go into Penn Station via those lines, and also stop at the airport.
How much of a pipe dream is this, realistically, given funding constraints? We did hear in that first section of the program how difficult it is even to get the funding to finish the 2nd Avenue subway, to bring it, when the current stretch that's under construction opens, to then extend it up to Harlem and down to the bottom of Manhattan. And that's just one project. Then they're talking about trying to bring Long Island Railroad into Grand Central and bring Metro North, as you say, into Penn Station. And those seem like, oh my God, how are we going to get those done? And then this seems so ambitious on top of that. How realistic?
It's not realistic at all. And the reason is because of the political mindset, not because of the infrastructure or the money. So it could be realistic if people saw it from a bigger picture perspective. The proposal that we have is less ambitious than the East Side Access project in terms of construction. And it would be far more advantageous.
That's Long Island Railroad going into Grand Central. That's East Side Access.
East Side Access. And what we're doing by bringing the Harlem and the Hudson line to the Northeast Corridor, the single-seat ride to the airport, as well as our proposal for a new office district in Sunnyside, Queens, would produce huge, huge tax revenue for the city, both of these projects, in a way that East Side Access would not, because there's already overcrowding in the east side of Manhattan.
How about buses as an alternative? I know some people who live on the Upper West Side and in Harlem who are fairly happy with how they can get to LaGuardia on the M60, which goes there and runs as, I don't know if it's a select bus.
It's a select bus,
So
yeah.
it makes limited stops to LaGuardia. Now, of course, that just serves that part of Manhattan. But what about an expanded bus rapid transit system instead of having to build all this physical infrastructure?
We're not really trying to fix LaGuardia. We're trying to allow for, a lot of the problems in New York came about during the Robert Moses era, where the airports were not until the 1990s connected to the rail system. And when they were done, it was done on the cheap with these sort of chintzy air train type designs. We're creating a design where you can go up the escalator from your platform and check in, and then from there you go to your gate. It's a full air-rail integration, and it's serving millions and millions of people directly, and LaGuardia provides the opportunity to do that. So it's a different mindset.
What are we seeing in this
Okay,
map?
great. This is the Sunnyside neighborhood, and we're creating a station that would be the same size as Penn Station, include all of the Bergen County and the Port Jervis lines in there, along with all of the Metro North lines at Sunnyside in the red area. That would be the new development area. We're looking at the new airport there. It's a plan view with the terminal at Port Morris, the Bronx, as well as people could still come into Queens for there. And the 2nd Avenue subway and the A train that would go there as well. We're also solving the overcrowding problem of the 2 and 5 train by diverting people from the Eastchester Dyer Avenue branch over to the A and the Q and the T, which was the original part of the original plan from 1968 under the Lindsay administration.
Anybody in power giving you a good hearing?
They haven't given us a bad hearing. We're very new to this. We're the new kid on the block.
And where are you off to?
I'm off to Stockholm. I've been invited to a New York-Stockholm collaboration urban design conference, and so I'm presenting the idea there.
Is there a city that is the closest model to what you envision for New York?
I think that we can be better than any other city. I don't think we have to model ourselves, but Paris, for example, in the 1960s, when Robert Moses, we were sort of hung over from Robert Moses, had the idea of linking all their rail terminals via underground subways, and they called it the RER. And our plan would do that for New York.
A lot of people are still hungover from Robert Moses,
Yeah.
but they need to take some aspirin. Thank you very much for joining us.
I appreciate your time.
Up next, high-tech streets that adjust to pedestrians. For commuters and travelers, planes, trains, buses, and bicycles are wonderful conveniences, even with the glitches and annoyances. But for the elderly and people with disabilities, a simple walk in the neighborhood can be a confusing and dangerous journey. Our next guest has a high-tech idea to teach the street furniture and technology like lights and signals to adjust and respond to individual needs. Among the features, traffic lights that know to give certain people more time to cross. Here's a simple cartoon from the English design firm Marshall's showing how such a system might work. That technology is called responsive street furniture. With us via Skype, visiting North Dakota from London, is designer and engineer Ross Atkin, who's been nominated for a Designs of the Year award from the London Design Museum. Thank you for joining us. Hello from New York.
Hello from North Dakota. Thank you very much for having me.
So that cartoon is very touching and very inspiring. How do some of these pieces of street furniture know that the individual walking past in that cartoon is infirm in some way, like whether the street light should get brighter for that individual?
So the individuals are identified to the street furniture by either their smartphones or by a key fob that they carry with them. And both of those devices have individual addresses. And basically there's a website where users or people that are working with users, like social workers or occupational therapists, can go and they can put in the address and then request which additional help that user would like. And then from then on, whenever that address is detected by one of the items, it'll give them that help.
And so the person wouldn't even need to kind of take out the phone and hold it up. It would just be giving off signal that would be read. Yeah.
I mean, in a way, it's already giving off that signal. So, yeah, we're just picking it up and seeing if we can help them.
Does it exist yet anywhere in the world, or is this just a design at this point?
Well, it works, and we've got it installed we've got the prototypes installed in the Design Museum at the moment, and we're putting in another prototype somewhere else in London this month. So it works and it's ready to install, but we haven't got any out in the wild yet. And
to get to your point about trade-off, is the idea of folding benches in the video so that there's space for people with wheelchairs?
Yeah, exactly. So I've done a lot of sort of accessibility research, and most of that's been shadowing different groups of disabled people as they move through public space, just sort of following around with the video camera. And one of the things that really struck me from doing that was there's this huge group of disabled people who they just can't walk very far without needing to have a rest, and there are loads of reasons why that might be. And so what we want is to put down lots more seating for those people and put it much more distributed through the environment. The problem is, by doing that, we'd often constrain the widths of the sidewalk, which would then make it difficult for wheelchair users to get past. So the idea of having a seat that is there when the person who needs it, but then sort of disappears, so it's no longer obstructing the footway.
And I guess what we saw in the cartoon was the stores would know if somebody blind was walking by, so the names of the stores would actually be spoken, right?
Exactly. I mean, in the video, it's the bollards are speaking the names of the stores that they're outside.
Yes. I want to play a little bit of a video that you suggested that we show. You want to just take 10, 15 seconds to set this up for us, this video aimed at the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson?
Yeah, so this was a video I came across about a year ago. And so one of the things that Boris Johnson did when he became mayor was rephased all the traffic lights so that the traffic flowed more easily, but it meant that the pedestrians had less time to cross. So this group of people in Kilburn in North London made this video about that.
And it helps to know that Boris Johnson has floppy blonde hair and a strong sense of humor. And here we go.
Hey, Mr. Boris. Mr. Boris, the mayor?
Making lots of jokes with your flip-flop hair.
Keep London moving. That's what you say. More lanes for cyclists. Get them on their way.
Hey, Mr. Boris, enough with the jokes. Time to listen to the older folks.
Like me?
Like me?
Like me? Like me?
Don't you know that 4 out of 5 older people can't cross the road at the lights? 4 out of 5 older people can't cross the road at the lights. True, Mr. Boris, it's us we're talking about. Would we lie to you?
So did Mr. Boris ever respond to that, as far as you know?
As far as I know, he hasn't. But I don't know everything he's done, so he might have done. But I mean,
go ahead.
That video, it's another trade-off, I guess. That, you want 95% of people don't need extra time to cross, and so you can move the traffic more quickly. But then you want to give the extra time to the 5% that do need it.
But with your devices and your design, it sounds like the traffic can move, the lights can stay green for the person walking longer on an individual by individual basis, right?
Exactly.
But then I guess the trade-off becomes, like in New York, we have a number of the one-way streets where the lights fall in a pattern so that a driver going, say, 25 or 30 miles an hour won't have to stop for a long, long time going up Amsterdam or down Columbus, down 2nd Avenue, things like that, if there isn't too much traffic. That would be disrupted.
Exactly. No. So we anticipate those junctions that are part of very complicated phasing. They're going to be the hardest for us to sort of get our fingers into, I guess. But in London, at least, we've got lots of crossings which are just not at junctions. They're just in the middle of streets. So and they often are just triggered by the demand from the pedestrian. So those ones ought to be the easiest to get at, because we wouldn't be necessarily impacting a whole traffic pattern by giving people longer at those crossings.
And so in our last minute, is there any one piece of these design elements that you think is the most practical to get going politically?
Yeah, I mean the street lighting and the bollards, even though they're potentially not the most impactful.
Sorry, what's a bollard? I don't think we have that word here.
So a bollard is a kind of small metal post that at least we use a lot in the UK, and it's used to prevent vehicles going on the footway, and sometimes they're just decorative, I guess. But originally they were kind of Napoleonic cannons that were set in the streets. But anyway, there are loads of them.
Okay.
And
so barriers for the cars not to go up on the sidewalks.
Yeah, and so those are going to be the easiest for us to get at, because the people that we have to convince in the municipalities to install them, it's only one group of people, I guess, just the people that do the bollards and the streetlights. They're the people that we're talking to anyway, so we don't have to kind of convince a load of traffic engineers to let us fiddle around with their traffic phasing yet. But we're definitely going to get there.
It's great that you're doing design for the future. It's inspiring. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that's our program for this week. That's Transportation Dreams, this special edition of BrianLehrer.tv. Missed any part of it? Find us at CUNY.tv, and we're here each week at this hour. And tune into my radio program weekdays at 10 a.m. on WNYC 93.9 FM and AM 820. Tomorrow, Malcolm Gladwell. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.